All right. Hi, I am Gypsy here with Clean and Sober Stoner and Monster Riff. And my buddy Blake, I'm going to let you say hi.
How's it going, everybody?
And we are here with Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean. And that is very exciting for us. This is really thrilling because the new album just came out. And I've been listening to it a bunch, and I know Blake has. Blake, what's been your biggest takeaway so far?
Really, honestly, I think this is a really big step forward for Change the Bottom of the Ocean. Like, I was a huge fan of Obsession Destruction. So, it was a real treat to see so soon a new album coming out. And I really see, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's Sisyphean or Sisyphean cruelty.
I mean, I would probably say like if it's Sisyphus, I would say Sisyphean probably.
Okay. Yeah,
But
so
yeah, I mess it up a
Sisyphean
lot too.
cruelty. All right, cool. Just making sure. But yeah, the new album is, in my opinion, a real creative step forward. I see a lot of originality and a lot of passion and anger, and just this impulse towards destruction, and it's truly one of my favorite albums of the year so far. So I'm really excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, same. So, Paul, I would love to start with can you tell us a bit about the band name?
Oh yeah, it's I mean, it's obviously a thou song. Um, that's people people realize that, and I think that that's actually become a major problem for us because uh people want to make that comparison, and I think it's just like too easy of a comparison at this point. Um, So I feel like we chose it thinking it would be great, and it feels great. And I think the imagery it conjures is fantastic, and it feels like us. But now I feel like we have to try to step outside of it so that we don't always get compared only to that.
That's fair. I can see that.
I mean, in terms of comparisons, there are worse bands to be compared to.
Oh
So
yeah, no, I mean obviously like we picked it because like as an homage. It wasn't like we picked it because we disliked them. Um,
Right.
I just think it's so funny, and even now people are like, it's just like a B-list thou. And I'm like, the new record doesn't even remotely sound like thou, but okay, I
not at
guess.
all.
Yeah, well that's interesting to hear because I would not that wouldn't be my take on it at all, especially with this new album. In fact, I, this may or may not come off as a compliment, but there is a track on your album from the year before, the 2023 album. Uh, I think it's the altar that to me the new thou stuff, the new thou album sounds a lot like that. So it feels like they sort of got some influence from you guys, which I think is cool. But it's not like plug and play, you sound like them, they sound like you guys have some similarities that are really they draw someone like me in, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't say it's anything remotely close to cookie cutter. You guys are who you are.
Yeah, I think like early it was much more inspired by that before we kind of found our own DNA. And so I think uh that's where it comes from. And it's never an insult. It just feels like I want to grow past that. And I think that was a huge part of
Definitely.
this record.
100%. That was actually one of my first questions I wanted to ask was about kind of the sonic differences between your first and second albums. Um, I have the first album on vinyl. I just pre-ordered the new album about a week ago. Really excited for it to arrive and everything. But I noticed this is a marked difference in sound. It's a lot more, at least to my ears. There's a lot more death metal influence. There's a lot more grindiness to it. Um, what spurred this, in my opinion, progression of sound for you guys?
Yeah. I think it's a couple of things, but I think that the that Obsession Destruction came out in 2023, and in between that record and this one, there's an EP that came out last December called Consumed, and that one I feel like we intentionally made a transition between the LPs with that, in that it has some of the like longer parts and the more spatial kind of guitar playing that takes you from the first LP to this one, because this one does not have a lot of like, there's no 10-minute songs, which is like very different than the last LP. But Consumed kind of took us from that more post metal influenced doom to maybe the more death doom that I think this next record is. And do I know why specifically? I probably couldn't tell you. I think a big part of it is just getting better at our instruments now and kind of being able to express ourselves in the way that maybe we always wanted to, but weren't able to. At least that's where it is for me as a guitar player. I just think I've practiced a lot more and I've gotten a lot better at stuff. So I was able to do more things that I always wanted to do that just I was never really able to.
That's exciting. And you do hear the progression from album to EP to album. It did feel, I'm glad you said that, because it did feel uh, like it was set up that way as a listener.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the whole intent, is like we don't want to do one that feels like it's completely out of left field. So we intentionally like transition between them.
That's really cool. It's a bridge.
Were there like a kind of different influences, or was it really just kind of the fact of, in terms of what you guys were listening to as you continued to write, or was it just kind of the fact of getting more comfortable as a band, getting more comfortable as individual musicians, and finding kind of your lane, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think like undeniably death metal has kind of had a new resurgence in the last few years. So
Yeah.
I don't think that the attempt was like, oh, we should follow that, but it was more like, oh, these are like things that I've been interested in and have kind of been in my world, but that I've never really, I guess, touched on. And like, there's all these new records coming out that are like really exciting. Uh, and I think those influence like the way that I want to play, or I go to a show and I see a band, like I'm trying to think what really influenced it. Like I think I saw Cruelty on the last thing we spoke about tour, and I went home and I was like, oh, that there's everything they did was sick. And I think that immediately influenced me to write the first song on the new LP. And they're not like a particularly death metal band, but like, they've got the influence there. And I think me wanting to sound like them resulted in like the first song on the record.
That's interesting. The first song is just, it's really driving. It grabs you right away. You got a little bit of that intro, but it sets the tone for the whole album, and it makes everything very cohesive. But I love hearing that you got to see something and go home and just write out of that experience. Blake and I have talked about how, death metal and grindcore and all of these really heavy genres have become more accessible, and there's so much more interest, and just album after great album has been out. And my little theory is that it's a way that we're all recovering from tough times in the pandemic and kind of answering that. How long have you guys been working together?
This is our 7th year as a band.
Okay, so you guys rode
So
all of that time.
yeah. So I mean, I could see that. I don't know if I would specifically like, I don't at least outwardly feel that it like influenced it, but I could see like as a world the need for like that sort of release and that sort of expression. Um, and if it came from me for the same reason, it would be subconscious. It was definitely wasn't something I was actively thinking about.
What are some of the things that you guys are actively trying to express through your music? Because I mean, like, just looking at the song titles, especially off the new album, I mean, these, obviously it's metal, it's supposed to be dark and heavy. Um, but these are especially intense songs, I guess I'd say. Like I think about like Crawl Off and Die, Barely Any Reason to Be Alive, One Last Dream, Unfit for Human Life. Like these are kind of existential sounding song titles. And so I was curious kind of like what was the emotional impetus behind some of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's odd because I feel like a lot of this I wrote at a time in my life that has actually been better than much of my previous life. So it's like there's no like it's not like a thing happened and then it was inspired it in particular, but I could tell you a specific thing that like inspired the feeling or the overall tone is that I travel a lot for work and I get into like YouTube holes
Mhm.
and I spiral like watching like 10-hour long YouTube essays on things that just don't matter. So this one in particular was absurdism. So like Albert Camus and other philosophers like that.
Mhm.
And that basically inspired the whole thing. And something that's interesting about like the titles and the way the record was written is that on this one, we came up with all the titles first and then wrote the music to the titles rather than the other way
No
around.
way.
Oh,
So I think that really helped push the tone of the record by like coming up with a theme and kind of explaining like how I wanted it all to feel and then reverse engineering the music to match the tone of the titles.
So would you say this is a concept album, or is it
Not
more conceptual?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that we've ever done is like I want it to be viewed as like a piece of art that stands like, together.
mhm.
So like I don't it's not like this album is a story about A to B and then it's over, but it's like it was all thought about together as one cohesive theme. And in that way, I guess you could call it conceptual. But I think of all of our releases as like this is just one unit
Mhm.
of something we've done.
And that's evident when you listen. We've talked about this before on this channel that for so long we were removed from the idea of a start to finish album, a purposefully laid out work of music. And I feel that in the all the subgenres that come with heavy, people are still thinking that way. Because it is poetry, and it's meant to be an art expression. So I love when a band puts that time in to telling it the way they want to tell it.
Yeah, and I don't think like I know that like singles or whatever is like not to me it's not really a thing in our style of music or in our world at all really. Like I don't know anybody who's sitting down and is like, "Oh, I just want to like pluck the one, I don't know, blood incantation song or whatever." Like when you're in, you're on for the whole ride.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend this morning, this and about the new album, and he was actually the guy that introduced me to Change the Bottom of the Ocean. He found you guys before me, so I'm pretty pissed about that. But we were talking about how this album really sounds almost like a continuous experience throughout. Um, in the way that it's almost more conducive in certain ways to, for example, like a CD format than vinyl, where you have to
Mm.
flip it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Because there's this amazing way that what you did with this album of the feedback that transitions the songs and how it's so seamless. One, what kind of inspired that approach, and two, how did you execute
I
that?
so I listened to the record on Spotify this morning on the way to work, and in basically any format that's not digital, like a streaming service, it has to like load or buffer or whatever. So like when we had
Yeah.
it on like SoundCloud or whatever, and we were listening to demos and early mixes and stuff, it doesn't flow the way that I want it to. And then this morning I listened to it on Spotify, and song one slams right into song two, which
Mhm.
is exactly how we wanted it. And there's a tempo change, and that's how we play it live. And I heard it for the first time today, and I went, "That's exactly how we wanted it to be." Um, and then the same thing between, I believe, Crawl, Orphan Die and Barely Any Reason to Be Alive. There's like, it stops, and the next riff just basically, they don't crossfade, but like they feel like the songs are just smashed together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded to me like if you were seeing it live, you would just go right into that next chord and not give people time to breathe. And I often listen to all like the new music that I'm getting into and reviewing on long car rides to gigs with a bandmate.
Mhm.
And it's funny you said Blood Incantation because one of the recent trips we took out of town, we listened to both the new Blood Incantation and your band's new album. And when we got done listening to Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean, it was very much a, whew, okay, let's do it again. You know,
Mhm.
start it over and listen again because it does have all those ups and downs. And it was definitely an album where we didn't really talk while we listened to it. There's too much to listen to.
Yeah, I definitely think we packed way more in way less this time around. Um, and part of that I think comes from, and to half answer a question that you asked before, is the way that we did guitar and the tone and everything on this was just like, it's one dimensional. So on the previous LP there were parts where I was like, well, I want to use a different guitar, or I want to use a different amp or whatever. And this time it's just, I all the amps are on, I hit go, and nothing changes. I don't change the settings, I don't change the guitar, I don't change the amp. It's just, we're on from beginning to end with no modifications.
Nice. That's why it feels
Interesting.
live on big speakers.
Yeah, and I think that's why it flows so well together, and like the feedbacks feel so cohesive between songs, because it's exactly how we would play it if we were to sit down and play all the songs in front of you.
Yeah, I mean when I listened to this album for the first time when there was no, like buffer time between songs, I was like, did they record this fucking album live?
Yeah.
Like like it feels like you literally went into a studio for, 36 minutes and played straight through and said, yeah, that's the album. In a really good way.
Yeah. In a lot of ways that's what happened, because it was like, I mean, not literally that fast, but it's like we played with the drummer, so drums go live, and then like most of them at the guitar I did in like probably a couple of takes. And it was like, it was nice because Seth, who recorded it, was very much like, did you like that? Can you do it better? No? Okay, that's fine. Then I think that was good. And like that rawness, I think, is what makes it feel so like strong.
Yeah, I appreciate it's not overproduced.
Yeah, which is definitely something we wanted to not do. I think I see a lot of records I really, really like burdened by that problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, it feels very much like of the gutter, like
Mhm.
it feels like it almost feels like you're supposed to hear this with you guys playing under like an overpass somewhere,
Yeah,
like at the entrance to a sewer or something.
yeah.
Um,
I wanted it to be gross, and it's gross.
it's definitely disgusting, like in the best way possible,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's from the album cover to the way that the songs work together to just the overall sound. It's that's why I think it's in a way a very creative step forward because of, and as opposed to what a lot of bands do where they say, okay, let's add more layers, like let's get more expansive. I mean, it would have been really hard for you guys to get more expansive off of Obsession Destruction, you know and instead it really feels like you guys said, let's go back to the basics of who we are, um and make something that's putrid and raw and evocative.
I think that's you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's what we were going for, and it was just like, let's just do more riffs and less wasting time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is very riff driven, not too many, long breakdowns, which are not a bad thing, but the pace of the way this album works, you come away from it with a little bit of tension like, okay, I should probably go jogging now or jog while I listen to it.
Yeah, I guess I wanted people to feel unwell. So if it did that, then I'm
It definitely
glad.
did. Yeah, it's. I say this as a compliment, even though it doesn't sound like it's a compliment, but it's a very sickening record.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Um, I was curious about one thing, and you don't have to go into like specific gear changes or anything like that if you don't want to, but if you do, you're more than welcome to. This is a musician channel.
Mhm.
We love hearing about that stuff. But there's a real difference in terms of, especially the guitar tone between Obsession Destruction and the new album. I'm just going to avoid saying the
No,
name
I
so I
got
don't
you.
sound
I got you.
stupid. Was that like another conscious decision to kind of have this? Because it reminds me in certain ways of almost like Nails to a certain extent.
Mhm.
Right, that's a good
Um,
Yeah, it does kind of
like
have like almost a chainsaw-y kind of guitar thing going on. It's not quite as biting. Um,
no, it doesn't sound shrill. It's still very low end heavy. But there's this like you know grindiness to it
mhm.
that I absolutely love, and I was just curious about the decisions that led to kind of that difference in tone
Yeah,
and how purposeful they were, or whether it was just, hey, this is the tone that I like right now, and this is what I'm going to go with.
yeah. My whole gear setup has been the same for a while now, and I think only one thing has really changed, which is like one new head. But we use and what I use live is what I use in the studio, which is just three heads and three cabs, and they're just always all three of them are always on. And then our bass is also stereo. So I think that's really all it is. And when we recorded the newest LP and the previous EP, we had the same setup, which is just those. I say this is what I use, and he puts the mics in front of it, and that's it. Rather than like isolating, like let's do one at a time or whatever. And I think the way it was recorded is actually the bigger difference than the gear. It just in that the first LP, I think, was supposed to be cleaner and was supposed to be more produced, I guess is the word I would use. And this one was just, this is what we sound like live. I want you to try to grab that as best you can.
Well, and I think that's great because you guys have proven what you can do. And you put a lot, obviously, you guys put a lot into the first album of proving, and maybe that wasn't the objective. You guys were making music, but you were able to prove what you guys can do musically, lyrically, and the whole overall sound. So now at this point, you guys have already shown what your chops are. You get to do what you want.
Yeah. And I do kind of feel like we had to do that first one. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it was, if anything, I was proving it to myself because it was like all the bands that I loved that inspired me to want to play music were like the Isises and the Neurosises and like these bands that are like to me bigger than life. They're like so emotionally heavy and they're so smart at what they do and so curated and uh, that was always the thing I wanted to do. And then we were able to do it and do it in a way that I was really satisfied with. And that was a really long process and took a lot of time and probably took all the ideas I had in that world away from me. So it was like once I was done, I don't want to feel stale trying to write the same thing again. And we're always writing music, so it just felt like the new record we had ideas and we just went with them. We weren't worried about like it being too far away sonically from the last one or anything like that.
Yeah, I feel like the difference in sonic quality is kind of one of the advantages that you have, as opposed to it being like jarring or a weakness for the band or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it shows like a a level of thought and a level of concern for the sonic quality of your output, um, that that is really unique. I feel like in the heavy underground.
Yeah, I guess I just don't want to get stuck. I don't want any like I don't want this record to come out and someone to be like, "Oh, it sounds a lot like the last one. These three songs are okay, but they could have just been on the last record." You know what I mean? I don't ever want
Mhm.
like I would rather them just be like, "I don't really like this record. Like the songs aren't for me." Than compare it to the last one and say like they were kind of the same.
Right. You don't want to be just repeating yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think I think it's a really cool approach in the way that you're doing that, because how much of it is forward thinking and how much of it is in the moment, I guess, is what I'm kind of curious about. Like, are you
Uh,
thinking about like two albums down the line, or are you just like, this is the album I want to make right at this exact fucking moment?
Usually we're at least thinking one release ahead, even if it's
Mhm.
just like an idea. Even if it's just, hey, this is uh like the next one, spoiler alert, is like we're like, hey, we really want to do one like 20-minute song or like two 10-minute songs for a double-sided EP. Like that's just a song that can only fit or a record that can only fit one song on each side. Like
mhm,
that, like long enough. So that's like a thing we've been talking about for a little bit now.
Mhm.
And we've been talking about since before this record was done. When this record was being written, I think the thought out process was like the theme and the titles and the imagery, and then the riffs came second to that. So it was like some practices, it would be like, hey, I have this idea that I came up with in a hotel room in upstate New York. And some of it would be like, what do you guys want to do? Like, how does the record want to open? How does the record want to close? What would be a good way to come out of the previous song? Like,
Mhm.
so when a song gets written, it's kind of like I think about it from beginning to end, the whole record. And if we just wrote song three, I'm like, well, what would I want to hear before song three? Or like
right.
song three is over. What's the first thing I want to hear after this? So in that way, a lot of it is like written sequentially, or once you have a piece, like we start building on either side of it, and then usually the first and the last song come last. But even still, it's some of both. A lot of it is like, here's a riff I brought, and a lot of it is like, what if we just tried this thing?
I love that, the collaboration on that and
Yeah.
when you think that way as a band, you get to dream a little bit and really focus on what you're doing now. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be a band and you're going to stick around for a while and you're going to try to to keep it going, you have to be able to allow for that. You
Mm-hmm.
can't get too lost in the moment of what you're doing and only be thinking about that, because then you kind of bleed and you leave it all there, but you also can't restrict yourself from, well, what do we see as our vision down the line? It's a legacy.
Yeah, and like it's hard to think like if I were to be like this is the last one or this is the last thing that I'm thinking about, I don't think I would be as good at like what I was doing because I'm like always wanting to do more, right? So if I'm like, oh, this is the last thing, I think I'll just over criticize it and never be satisfied. Like I'll be like, well, we should rewrite it. Well, you know what I mean? And I'll get in a way that won't be healthy. It's just like there's another record. There will always be another record. Like I'll never stop writing music. So I'd rather just be satisfied with the thing that I'm doing, feel really good about it, put it down on tape, and then go on to the next thing.
I love
So,
that.
so are you already working on the next album?
Yeah, a little bit. We probably won't do a full LP for a couple of years now because back to back years is a lot. But
Mhm.
I would venture to guess that like next year's 2025. I would venture to guess that something will come out in 2025. It would be, if we didn't, it would be the first year in the last 7 years that we didn't put something out. So I just don't really see that as happening.
It's not how you guys operate.
Yeah, we just always have something like that we want to do and we feel the need to push. So I don't, I mean, it's possible, but the way things are going, it seems pretty likely.
So you talked about how this album is very live driven in a way, like kind of would you say it's kind of inspired by the live experience?
Yeah,
in certain ways.
Yeah, I would say that it's like a very good harnessing of the live show. Yeah.
What do you consider is the balance between, you know, being a band that has a studio output and a live presence? You know, like do you consider them to be two sides of one coin in terms of how you like to emphasize them and build them up and kind of cultivate a sound and an experience?
Um, for some bands, it's like I understand that there has to be a difference, but
Mhm.
for us, I want it to basically be as I want them to be as close to each other as possible. So like the one main difference I think is that like live, you're gonna have like it's gonna be like very visceral. Like we're really, really loud. That's like half of the point, I think, is to like really feel it. Um and like we play, I think, more like a hardcore band, like physically on stage than
Yeah.
like a doom band. So I think our desire to make you feel it is what I want to come across in the recording. And I think that this is the best possible version of that. And a part of that comes from like the feedback and the chaos and the maybe not the most perfect take I've ever had on guitar, but like that's what would happen in if you saw me. So like I think that's part of why it feels so good to like the new record feels so good. It feels really natural. It feels like exactly what you would get. Um, and that's what I want when I go see a band. Like I want to feel like I want it to feel like that's the best version of them, and then I want that to come across in the record. But I'll often like I would rather watch a live set than listen to a band's record most of the time.
Yeah.
Like if a band is really into it, it's like I don't know that's way better than the record.
Yeah, I would agree. Getting that experience live, you can't bottle that.
No, and like when a band is doing like these big thing right now is like bands doing full album sets.
Hmm.
Like I'm going and I'm like this rocks. Like this is like I've listened to this. Like I just went to the Lamb of God Mastodon tour, and I was like I've probably listened to both of these records 500 times in the last 10 years or whatever. And I went 2 nights in a row, and it was sick both times. I was just like I forgot how good these guys are.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that approach in a band such as yourselves, where there's so much of an insistence that the live performance has to be. It almost sounds like you want the live performance aspect of it to be even better than the studio recording of it. Like the.
I mean, I might. I have more fun, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't really love the studio. I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't really love the studio process. Like, I don't like sitting there and being like, okay, I have to play it. Okay, I have to play it again. Oh, my solo take. I can't play a solo anyway. Oh, my solo take was bad. I guess I have to try it again. And then everybody agonizes over it. They're like, oh, the drum fill wasn't great, or the bass, you squealed weird, or the. I don't care about that shit. Like, I like when I'm standing in front of 3 amps and they're all turned all the way up, and there's anywhere between 3 and 100 people in the room.
Yeah. It's always
How much?
impressive to me when sorry, Blake. It's always impressive to me
No, go ahead.
when you know an album or a song or an artist's work so much, and then you go there and they do almost exactly what's on the album. Like that precision to me is amazing. But then you look for those little subtle differences and they're just such a thrill. So
Mm-hmm.
you just any band that I love, I try to make it to the live shows, just not to strip down and compare the difference between the two, but just to enjoy the two presentations of their art. And I realize I'm still holding Kermit Who Fell. Anyway, are you guys touring right now?
No, we've only got 3 shows for the rest of the year, and then we'll probably do some longer things next year, but nothing in stone yet.
Do you like touring?
I do, yeah, I love it. Um, I think we are kind of at the point now where it's much healthier than the touring I've done in the past.
Yeah.
Like before in old bands, it was just like we're going on tour for a month, and you in a month you might have one good show or like
Mm,
2 good shows, and now it's like we do 10 days or 2 weeks, and like 90% of them are really good. Like you play a random Tuesday in a town you've never been in, and 50 people come, and that's fantastic for us.
Yeah.
So like, but that used to be one every 30 shows. Now
mm.
that it's almost every one, and I probably just jinxed myself. Um, like I would have like when we do runs now, I'm like I could keep going. This wasn't punishing in any way.
Yeah.
That shows you
What
guys
do
have
you
work.
Yeah, definitely. I that kind of that might answer my question, but I was going to ask, like, what do you think has changed for you guys that has led to the more consistent crowd, I guess?
You know, I don't know. It's
Mhm.
if music feels like such a crapshoot and just like a right time, right place, right share on Instagram, like, and I can be mad about it all day, and I am mad about it a lot of the time. But I just hope that it's like people don't forget because we put out so much music, and if we don't go away
Yeah.
for long enough, then like people won't be able to forget us. But I wish there was like I always think, oh, this next record, oh, this next release, or oh, this next tour, or like there will be some piece of the puzzle that unlocks some bigger opportunities for us. But we have not been lucky enough to have any of those. So it's like it's very slowly chipping away, is what it's always been.
It's that slow uphill climb. You just have to keep going. There's no real rhyme, reason, magic recipe. You just have to do the work, and then some of it is just timing that we can't control.
Yeah. And I would love like for some viral thing to happen and people to be really excited about us or to get some tour opportunity off of it. But I'm not unhappy or ungrateful for like all the opportunities we've had up to now.
Well, we definitely want to help push you guys out there because we love what you're doing.
Yeah, this I mean I didn't think that, like, I loved Obsession Destruction so much that I was honestly kind of worried about this album when I saw it get announced. I was like, there's how's this going to go? Like, cuz you always worry when you have an album that you really love, that the next one is going to be somehow of some kind of a disappointment in some way. But I think the approach that y'all took with this was so smart and so emotionally driven. That's at least how it sounds to my ears. That you nailed it, and I think this is it's a hell of a follow up to a hell of a first album.
Yeah, I think what you said is like also half the battle, right? Because if we had tried to do something that was more akin to the other one, I think we just miss. I think like I just don't think we're able to follow a double LP with like another double LP with another 12-minute song. Like I think it's just too much.
Definitely.
some of those things you just have to let them occur naturally. I mean, you're coming, you guys seem to be coming at this very with a professional mindset of this is what we do and we want to do it well, but you also seem to let some things flow. And you have to have both if you want longevity out of your albums. Well, I will be looking for tour dates. That would be great.
Where are
Yeah,
you
come
guys
to.
both?
We're not in this.
I'm in Texas.
Yeah, I'm in California.
We did just do the West Coast, so that's probably never going to happen again.
Oh. I just need to get a helicopter. I keep missing things.